Hello everyone, welcome back to Into Sports. I am Evan K, and today I'm giving you my full NFL predictions, all of my team's records, division winners, Super Bowl pick at the end. But before I do me a big favor, click that subscribe button. It would really help me out a lot. Anyways, let's get to the first division, NFC North. I have Green Bay easily winning the North because of one man, Aaron Rodgers. Potentially his last dance in Green Bay. I think he's going to be motivated and firing on all cylinders. Now, my only concern with Green Bay is their offensive line. They're going to be missing their best tackle, David Bakhtiari, for the first 6 weeks at least. And they're not going to be dominant up front as much as they were last year when Rodgers had plenty of time to throw. But we know Devontae Adams is a stud, Aaron Jones out of the backfield. Green Bay is going to be really good, but mainly because of Aaron Rodgers. Then second division, I have the Minnesota Vikings 9-7. I have them making the playoffs. I think we see a bit of a bounce back year from Minnesota because of the defense. Last year, 18th defensively DVOA. And this is a team that was top 5 defensively the previous 3 seasons. Also, they've been in the playoffs every other year under Mike Zimmer. They didn't make it last year. I think the trend continues and they make it this year. Chicago Bears 8-9. I think the interesting story here is Justin Fields versus Andy Dalton. The way I see this is Dalton starts the first couple weeks, maybe it's only 1 week, but Justin Fields becomes the starter pretty soon. This is still a good defense, not elite, but very good defense. They have Allen Robinson at receiver, who's going to make whatever quarterback they put in there look pretty good, catching some 50-50 balls. Darnell Mooney could have a breakout year. The offensive line is a concern, so I'll go 8-9 with the Bears. Then Detroit, this is pretty simple, 4-13. They have a serious lack of talent. So this year is not about winning games for Detroit. It's about creating a culture and setting themselves up to take a quarterback in the draft next year, because I don't think there's any chance they make a legitimate playoff push. NFC East. I'm going with the Washington football team winning the division for the second straight year, but this time just a much better team overall because of Ryan Fitzpatrick. Last year, they started Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, Kyle Allen. Fitzpatrick is a big upgrade over those guys. And last year, of course, they won the division with those 3 starters. And it's also a very explosive receiving core. I'm a big fan of Terry McLaurin. Elite speed, elite explosiveness. And then they add Curtis Samuel in free agency, who's a little bit like that as well. He's a smaller guy, but can take the top off the defense. So I think offensively this year, unlike last year, Washington is actually going to be explosive on the offensive end. They're going to push the ball down the field. It's not going to be 3-yard dump downs every play. And also, of course, this team is still led by their defense and the best defensive line in football. So much talent up there, so much young talent as well, especially Chase Young, number 2 pick out of Ohio State last year. Second in division with an 8-9 record, but no playoffs, the Dallas Cowboys, because this is really the same old Cowboys. I know they played most of last year with Andy Dalton as the starter, but Dak Prescott is not going to come back and save this team. In fact, they're 7-11 in Dak's last 18 starts. Now, I do think the defense should be a little bit better, but when I say same old Cowboys, they're going to give up a lot of points early, they're going to have a ton of yards, and they're going to come back, and they're going to lose the game by 7. Feels like they're always putting up semi-garbage time stats because they give up big leads early in the game. I see the same thing happening again. Third in the division, New York Giants. I thought about putting them second because I really am a believer in Daniel Jones. And I'm a believer in their skill position players, their weapons. Saquon Barkley, back. Kenny Golladay, add him in free agency. Sterling Shepard is still a solid receiver. But I'm just not a believer in this offensive line. And I think Daniel Jones, still with some fumbling issues behind this offensive line, is not going to be a good combination. I think that's ultimately what the downfall of this team is. The defense was better than expected last year with new head coach Joe Judge, and they had multiple players retire this offseason, potentially because of Joe Judge's strictness and Belichickian ways. So Giants could have maybe a playoff push, but I'm going to be skeptical because of that offensive line. Then last in division, Eagles, 4-13. This year is all about seeing what they have in Jalen Hurts. Outside of structure, Hurts, when he can play backyard football and make plays, he's really, really good. But in structure, he's uncomfortable. So this year is all about Hurts' development, see how good of a connection he has with rookie Devontae Smith, who could be really, really good. NFC South. This is a Buccaneer-dominated division. I think they're the only playoff team in this division. The Bucs have surrounded Tom Brady perfectly. They give him an excellent offensive line, so he can stay clean in the pocket, doesn't have to take hits because he doesn't want to. And they have an elite receiving core. It's probably the best receiving core in the league. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown as their wide receiver 3. And also, the defense is really, really good. They fly all over the field. The linebackers, the secondary is really young, but really good. Up front, they're great. And this team really heated up as the year went on last year. I think they're going to be clicking out of the gate and the number 1 seed in the NFC. Number 2 seed in this division, New Orleans Saints. I think this is a letdown year for the Saints at 8-9. I really see them as the 2020 Patriots, where they lose their all-time great quarterback. They still have a head coach who's exceptional, Sean Payton. Patriots have Bill Belichick, but they don't have enough offensive skill position players to get it done. They lose a lot of pieces in free agency, like the Patriots lost in free agency and to opt-outs. So these are the 2020 Patriots right here. And what makes me lose faith in this team is when I see what the Buccaneers did without Jameis Winston and with Tom Brady. Jameis Winston had maybe the best roster in football. Now, they did make improvements when they got Brady, besides, of course, the quarterback. But Winston had one of the best rosters in football, and he went 7-9 in his last year with the Bucs. So even if the Saints surround him really well, I'm skeptical that they can even make the playoffs. 3rd seed, Carolina Panthers, 7-10. I think Darnold is an upgrade over Bridgewater, but really I'm not positive about it whatsoever. Now, even if Darnold plays at the level of Bridgewater, they still have really, really good weapons. DJ Moore, Terrace Marshall Jr., Robbie Anderson, 3 good receivers, and Christian McCaffery out of the backfield. But the defense is young. They're just not there yet, so 7-10 for Carolina. Then also at 7-10, Atlanta Falcons with Matt Ryan, who's still playing really good football. You lose Julio Jones, but you add Kyle Pitts, the tight end kind of / receiver hybrid out of Florida, who was picked 4th in the draft. You also have Calvin Ridley, so you still have weapons. New head coach Arthur Smith, who's going to bring a play-action style attack from the Tennessee Titans. So expect a lot of play action, running the ball with Mike Davis, and taking shots down the field to Calvin Ridley and potentially Kyle Pitts. But the defense, it's pedestrian, and the Falcons always find a way to lose close games. Then we have the NFC West, which is clearly the best division in football, in my opinion. And I have them with 3 playoff teams. And honestly, the Cardinals, I wouldn't be shocked if they made the playoffs either. Starting with the Rams, 12-5. Matthew Stafford is a big upgrade over Jared Goff. Let's be very clear about that. The book on Matthew Stafford is going to be rewritten. All I hear is that he doesn't win games. All I hear is that he hasn't won a playoff game. But we're going to see a guy who's playing late into January this year with head coach Sean McVay, who's a stud. He's going to scheme people open. Good receiving core with Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. This offense is just going to be so much better with Stafford than Goff. Goff was turning the ball over, and he wasn't giving you those play extension, splash plays down the field. Stafford can give you all of that, and probably with less turnovers than Goff did. This is also a top 5 defense. Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey. My only concern with this team is their depth. They're pretty thin. So if they do suffer quite a few injuries, well, it's going to be trouble because they don't have much depth. Only concern with the Rams. I think they're an incredible team. 2 seed, Seattle, 11-6. The first half last year for Seattle, the offense was absolutely on fire. Wilson just taking shots down the field to Metcalf and Lockett. But the defense was weaker than a wet paper bag. But in the second half of the year, the offense actually struggled, shockingly, with Wilson, Metcalf, and Lockett. And the defense really stepped up. So if they can get those two to be firing at the same time, this is a really dangerous team. I do lean that this is going to be an offensively driven team. New offensive coordinator. I do think they are kind of getting figured out with Brian Schottenheimer. So they're going to have a new offensive coordinator. Offense is going to look a lot more like the Rams offense with play action, bootlegs. Russell Wilson can certainly do that at a high level, and he is an elite quarterback. Third seed, 10-7, another playoff team, San Francisco 49ers. This is probably the most confusing team in the NFL to me. And it's probably because I have no clue what they're going to do at quarterback. It looks like they may alternate snaps with Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. That would be very interesting. I mean, Kyle Shanahan, I think he's one of the best coaches in football. Whatever quarterback is in there for San Francisco is going to have a lot of success. They're going to see a lot of open looks created by Kyle Shanahan and his offensive genius. And also, I look for this defense to be a lot healthier. Remember how good this defense was in their Super Bowl year. And honestly, even though they had a guy like Nick Bosa out for all of last year, they were still a pretty solid defense last year. So it's going to be a great defense. Not exactly sure what they are on offense, but I do know Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, they have weapons and they have the play caller to potentially make a deep playoff push, although I'm not exactly sure what to think of them right now. Then Cardinals, 8-9. I think Cliff Kingsbury is under a lot of pressure this year. He's on the hot seat because I think his offense was getting figured out a little bit. You look at a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, his route tree, it's very limited. Teams know exactly where he's going to be at all times. And I think that's limiting what Kyler Murray can do. Kyler Murray is really, really good. And I don't have much questions about Murray. I have a lot more questions about Kingsbury, though. They add J.J. Watt, who has really struggled with injuries recently. He'll be a nice addition when he's in there, alongside Chandler Jones, for a nice pass rush duo. But ultimately, the division will be too tough for the Cardinals, and they won't make the playoffs. AFC North, Cleveland Browns, 11-6, going to the playoffs. I really flip-flop between them and the Ravens because I think this is a coin toss division. This defense for Cleveland is going to be totally revamped. They get two of the best players from the Rams secondary. They add them, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in the draft, Jadeveon Clowney, Greg Newsome, another corner in the draft. So defense totally revamped because it was quietly a big issue last year. And then this Odell Baker connection, I think they're going to start to click this year. Now Odell off the injury, he might get off to a rough start, but I really do think Odell and Baker will finally click because of Kevin Stefanski, who did a great job, their head coach, their play caller, year one, implementing his offense. It really helped Baker out and have a bounce back year from 2019. Then the Baltimore Ravens also at 11-6. Like I said, it's a coin toss for the first place in this division between Cleveland and Baltimore. What do we know about the Ravens? They are bullies. When they play the bottom feeders of the NFL, they could win 49-6 on any given week. That's how dominant they can be with Lamar Jackson in the quarterback run game, Gus Edwards and company in the typical run game that's opened up by Lamar Jackson. But the big thing for this team to have postseason success is going to be the passing game. And frankly, I don't think their receivers and offensive coordinator are good enough to make this an above average passing offense. I don't see it. So I'm not going to pick them to make a deep run in the playoffs, although I think they could win a playoff game. Now, defensively, when we think of the Ravens, we think of Terrell Suggs, Ray Lewis, we think of the front seven, but actually the secondary is what's driving this defense because it's absolutely elite. Marlon Humphrey, I think, is definitely a top 5 corner in football and the anchor of that unit. Pittsburgh Steelers, 9-8. They've never had a losing season with Mike Tomlin. I don't think they have one this year. They have a new offensive coordinator, and they needed one because last year they had an inability to stretch the field. Everything was 10 yards or less, quick passing game. So they need to stretch the field because they have guys that can do that. Chase Claypool could have a breakout season when you look at his athleticism. Deontay Johnson, really, really good receiver. And Juju's generally going to be your underneath guy. So if they can stretch the field a little bit, I think that's going to scare teams off and open up the run game. They draft Najee Harris in the first round, which I don't think was a good move. I think they should have gone offensive line because that's a weakness for them. But they decided to go running back. I personally disagree. And I do have some questions about Big Ben. I'm not totally sure what he is right now. There wasn't conclusive evidence on film to tell me that he is washed and he's done. And there also wasn't conclusive evidence to tell me, oh yeah, Big Ben can play 2 or 3 more really solid years. So I'm not exactly sure what to expect from Big Ben as he's aging. But I do know what to expect from this defense. Dominance. Number 1 ranked defense according to DVOA last year. Steelers, they're going to be dominant defensively. Bengals, 4th team in the division, 4-12. 5-12 actually. 17 games now. Joe Burrow's health is the question because he had that ACL and MCL tear last year in the middle of the season, and it looks like he's going to try to start week 1. That's a little dangerous. That's a little risky to put the future of your franchise out there when he's not 100%. Then you look at Jamar Chase, who they took 5th in the draft. Can't even catch the football, and he's a wide receiver. That's an issue, although that's probably more of a mental thing that he can fix because he absolutely does have the talent to be a really good receiver in this league. They're going to throw a lot because the defense is bad. So T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, they're going to get a lot of looks from Joe Burrow. But really, at the end of this year, I would not be surprised at all if Zach Taylor, their head coach, is out and they have a new regime with Joe Burrow going into next year. The Bills are the cream of the crop in the AFC East, and I have them winning 12 games and the division. This team is all about Josh Allen. This team goes as far as Josh Allen goes. They have an average defense. The pass rush could improve, but generally average on defense. Absolutely no run game. So they just rely on Josh Allen dropping back, running around, and making plays. Throwing to Stephon Diggs, throwing to the newly signed Emmanuel Sanders. It's all about Josh Allen for the Bills, and I have extreme confidence in Josh Allen, so I'm going to make them 12-5. Patriots 10-7. This is a team that went on a spending spree in free agency. At first, I thought it was a little crazy. Bill Belichick was looking at what Tom Brady did in Tampa Bay and getting a little desperate. But it looks like this team is actually really solidly built because now they have Mac Jones. They just cut Cam Newton. And when you read between the lines, between the cut of Cam Newton, all the reports out of training camp with the way Mac Jones has played, everything we've seen in preseason, it looks like Mac Jones could be really, really good. Now, one thing I worry about with Mac Jones is he's not going to have great receivers to throw to. His tight ends are really better than his receivers. They got Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. They're going to catch a lot of passes because the receiving core, underwhelming. But I do have faith in Josh McDaniels offensively to scheme people open, and then obviously Bill Belichick defensively and in a general way to elevate this team. 3rd in the division, Miami. No playoff berth for Miami, even though I'm all in on this team. But I'm all out on this quarterback. This season is all about Tua because they have the defense, the receiving core, which is newly upgraded. The coach I really like, Brian Flores. This is a Super Bowl contending roster outside of quarterback. That's why I think if they traded for Deshaun Watson, they're as good as the Chiefs, they're as good as Rams, Buccaneers, all those top teams. Last year, Tua was underwhelming. There's no way around it. Now, I do think he will and can improve this year. I just don't think he's going to be a top 12, top 10 type quarterback. I think realistically, what you're hoping for if you're a Dolphins fan is kind of a 2019 like Jimmy Garoppolo season where, yeah, the team doesn't really want the ball in your hands, but you can manage the game enough and distribute enough with good weapons around you to lead a nice playoff run. Bottom of the barrel in the AFC East, the New York Jets, 5-12, even though I really like what they're building for the future in New York. I'm a big fan of Robert Saleh, who they just hired a head coach, and I really think Zach Wilson could be special with his arm talent and off-schedule playmaking ability. It pops off the screen. So this is not a ready-made contending type roster, but this is a team that's building for the future and could really have a bright future. Then down south in the AFC, I'm taking the Tennessee Titans to win the division and go 10-7. This is an elite offensive team. Just think about the weapons here. Derrick Henry, who I think is one of the few difference-making running backs in this league. Julio Jones, who they just traded for, and A.J. Brown, the best wide receiver duo in the NFL, and Ryan Tannehill throwing them the ball off of play action. Tannehill, he's not going to make a ton of plays on his own, but when he's given an open window, he's going to thread the needle right in there. Julio, A.J. Brown, this is going to be an incredibly efficient offense. But the defense is really bad. 29th last year according to DVOA. It's going to be great offense, bad defense, and generally, I think that's about a 10-6 team. Second in the division, Indianapolis Colts. They've really been injured this offseason, which is the reason I'm taking Tennessee. And this receiver core is quietly really suspect. They lose T.Y. Hilton. He's on the IR. Could come back later in the year. But just with Michael Pittman, Paris Campbell, I do think Carson Wentz has a good chance to revive his career. And generally, I think he will. But with this receiving core, it's going to be a little tough, although he's back with Frank Reich, his offensive coordinator, MVP year in Philadelphia. I think that's going to help out a lot. And generally, I think Wentz is going to have a good year. Jacksonville Jaguars, third in the division. They've had a really weird and eventful offseason. Obviously, they draft Trevor Lawrence out of Clemson, first pick. And I do think he's going to have a solid first year. He's going to have a really nice career, but it could be a little rocky at the beginning because this roster is just not ready to win. They won a single game last year, so I don't expect much from Jacksonville, second worst defense a year ago. And then a team that's actually worse than Jaguars, Houston Texans, 3-14. Yeah, there's really nothing good about this roster. And then, of course, the Deshaun Watson situation is hovering like a storm cloud over this organization. At the time of this recording, Watson is still in the Texans, although he's not going to be the starter. It's going to be Tyrod Taylor. Final division, AFC West, Kansas City Chiefs, 12-5, best record in football. This is the same nucleus, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid, but it's a new offensive line. We saw the offensive line get exposed in the Super Bowl. Well, what'd they do? Yeah, they revamped it. So I mean, that's going to be a huge improvement. And one of the issues the Chiefs have is defenses just play totally off them. They play deep coverage. And they do that because they don't want to get beat deep by Mahomes throwing a laser down the field to Hill or Kelce. But I think with this newly improved offensive line, they can start running the ball a little bit better. They can force teams to lurk up and then throw it right over their heads. So the Chiefs, again, great as usual. Then we have the Chargers, second place in the division, and a playoff team at 10-7. Justin Herbert is special. We saw it last year, and he was playing behind the worst offensive line in football, but now they massively improved this offensive line. And frankly, they remind me a lot of the Browns last year. Both the 2019 Browns and the 2020 Chargers had really bad offensive lines, but then the next year, the offensive line goes from a weakness to a strength. Both teams had great skill position players, but the wrong head coach. The Browns had Freddie Kitchens, moved to Kevin Stefanski. Anthony Lynn had underachieved for the Chargers the last few years. They moved to Brandon Staley, who shows a lot of promise, led the #1 defense last year with the Rams. And I really just think this Chargers roster that has a lot of talent is finally just going to click. I think this is the year that the Chargers click and potentially make a nice playoff run. Broncos 7-10. They've decided to start Teddy Bridgewater over Drew Lock, which right now I agree with, but In a few weeks, I wouldn't be shocked to see Drew Lock starting again, but I do think Teddy Bridgewater, with this receiving core, a defense that should be much better and much healthier this year, can manage the Broncos to 7 wins. But I think they have a much higher ceiling if they go with Drew Lock, but also more volatility if they go with Lock, because he makes some of the worst decisions you'll ever see, but also some eye-popping throws. Last in the division, not the Oakland Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders at 6-11. I'm not high on this team at all. Now, I do like Derek Carr, I like John Gruden, the play caller, and I like Darren Waller. But I don't really like anything else. This offensive line went last year from a strength to this year a weakness. So it's not going to be a good offensive line this year, and it's not going to be a good defense. Last year, bottom 5 according to DVOA. Raiders, 3 pieces I like, everything else I don't like. Now let's go to my AFC playoff picture. Number 1, Chiefs, they get the bye. Bills, Browns, Titans as the 4 division winners. Then Ravens, Chargers, Patriots. As I mentioned earlier, between 3 and 5, Baltimore and Cleveland, that's pretty much a coin flip. So we're going to see a really solid team in the wild card in the AFC, I believe. And I just think the AFC is definitely the better conference this year. Here's the weaker conference, the NFC. Bucks, Rams, Packers, all with the same record at 12-5. But I'm just going to go with the safe pick in the Bucks to get the bye, since they're in the easiest division out of those 3. Washington football team, I think, is the 4th division winner. Seattle and San Francisco, both from the NFC West. And then Minnesota. This is why I say the AFC is better than the NFC. Minnesota would definitely not be a playoff team in the AFC, but I do think they slip in here, have a bounce back year with a much improved defense. But now let's go to my final 4 teams in the AFC. The Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Andy Reid. Yes, please. They're one of the 4 best teams in football, no doubt in my opinion. But the one that's more of a surprise here, and I had to throw in a little surprise, the Los Angeles Chargers. I just love the upside of this team. Herbert, we know, is a stud. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams if he can stay healthy. Really good receiving core. But the defense, Brandon Staley, who just led the number 1 defense in football, the Rams, he has a lot of chess pieces to play with. Derwin James is a star, but he hasn't been healthy. If he's healthy, that's a big addition. Joey Bosa, great pass rusher. I just think the Chargers have so much upside and potential with this offensive line, much improved. They've had some bad luck injury-wise, and I just think with the new coaching staff, the talent is finally going to click. Remember, they were 12-4 just 2 years ago with a pretty similar roster. And NFC, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Los Angeles Rams. You know how much I think Matthew Stafford is of an upgrade over Jared Goff. And Tom Brady, the Bucs, those weapons, that defense, yeah, I'm putting them in the Final 4, but I'm not putting them in the Super Bowl, because I think the Los Angeles Rams are the best team in football with Matthew Stafford, and I think they will beat the Kansas City Chiefs. This would be a heck of a battle if it were to happen. Los Angeles would have a home Super Bowl, just like the Bucs did last year. But my reason for making the Rams the champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers went 7-9 2 years ago with Winston, who's like a bottom 5 starter. They upgrade to a top 10 quarterback, and then they win the Super Bowl. Well, the Rams just went 10-6, and they had Jared Goff, who I think is a bottom 5 starter. And then they upgrade to a top 10 quarterback, Matthew Stafford. And yes, I think they're going to win the Super Bowl. Bucs made that same transition of quarterback, 7 wins to Super Bowl. Rams just won 10 games last year. So I definitely think they can win the Super Bowl this year. And then Kansas City Chiefs, they're such a safe pick to make it this far because they've been to the conference championship at least the last, 3 or 4 years. I think that new revamped offensive line is going to be critical for Kansas City, but I don't think it's enough to stop Aaron Donald and company on that defensive line. I have the Rams winning the Super Bowl. Anyways, those are my full NFL predictions. The Rams come out on top. Matthew Stafford laying waste to the narrative that he can't win the big games. But let me know your Super Bowl prediction down in the comments below. Also, click that subscribe button and maybe even leave a like on the video. I'm your host, Seven, and I'm out. Peace.